He rejects the moniker King of B movies, preferring instead to be thought of as the most fiscally responsible film producer working today. He shot the original Little Shop of Horrors in just 2 days and has a stellar track record of giving the first big break to future film superstars such as Martin Scorsese, James Cameron, Jack Nicholson, and Robert De Niro. He is credited with producing nearly 400 films, including Death Race 2000, Frankenstein Unbound, and Sharktopus. Hello, I'm Ernie Manouse. Coming up on Interviews, our conversation with Academy Award-winning filmmaker Roger Corman. For you, what is the definition of success?
Success, I would think, comes in various ways. Professionally, it's to make motion pictures that I enjoy making and that I would hope the audience would enjoy seeing, and maybe that would cause them to think a little bit. Personally, it's probably involved primarily with my family, with my wife and my children.
When you talk about entertaining an audience, is there something that you have that others are lacking that tells you what an audience will enjoy? And I ask it like that because early on in your career, you were able to tap into something, and other studios were missing it. Other filmmakers were missing it. What do you think that was?
Well, I'm not certain that I have any specific thing that somebody else might not have, but I think the fact that I started when I was very young. I made my first film, I think, when I was 27 or 28, something like that. And the audience was and is youthful. And at that time, the major studios had major stars under contract. These stars were 40 and 50 years old because it took that long, not that long, it took years for them to become stars. So they were making pictures with leading men and leading ladies playing romantic roles sometimes in their 40s and 50s, and the audience was about 15 to 30. And being in that age bracket myself, I understood that, and I was making films for young people with young people playing the roles.
True or false that the way you came into making your own films, you were a screenwriter and had written a film and didn't turn out exactly as you had hoped?
That's true. I had written a picture called The House in the Sea. There's a sea called the Salton Sea in Southern California that is overflowing its banks. And I was vacationing there once, and I noticed that there were a number of houses that were flooded and abandoned because the sea had taken over the first floor. So I wrote a chase picture across the desert, ending up in the climax of a gunfight in a flooded house. The picture was made somewhat differently, and the title was changed from The House in the Sea to Highway Dragnet, because Dragnet was a popular TV series. I made a little money from the sale of the script, and I thought, I think I'm going to make my own films with this. So I went to various friends I'd gone to college with, raised a little money with them, and let me see, I think I got $5,000 for the script, and I raised $7,000 from friends. I had $12,000, and I got various deferments. So I made the picture for $12,000 cash and deferments, including a lab deferment. It cost about $30,000. And again, the title was changed. This time, it was an undersea monster picture that I wrote and produced. I wasn't directing at that time. I called it It Stalked the Ocean Floor. I got a distribution deal that paid me my cost of production back, gave me a little bit of a profit, and then gave me a percentage of whatever the distributor grossed. And the distributor said, It Stalked the Ocean Floor is too arty a title, and the title was changed to Monster from the Ocean Floor. The distributor might have been right, because it did rather well.
Did it? Okay, take me back even before that. Film, did you always want to get involved with it? At what point did that happen for you?
It happened a little late. Many people I know, a number of directors I know, some of them started with me, Marty Scorsese, Francis Coppola, Peter Bogdanovich. They knew when they were 10 or 11 years old that they wanted to make films. My father had been an engineer, and I went to Stanford as an engineering major, and in my spare time I was writing for the Stanford Daily. And I found out that the film critics for the Daily got free passes to all the theaters in Palo Alto. So I became a film critic. And then I started looking more carefully at the films, analyzing them, because I was going to have to write about them. And I decided I wanted to make films, but I was a senior as an engineer, and I thought, I don't want to start over in another major. Frankly, I just wanted to get the degree and get out. So I graduated in engineering, but I was the failure of the engineering class at Stanford that year. Everybody else got good jobs in engineering. I got a job riding a bicycle as a messenger at 20th Century Fox.
What are your memories of 20th Century Fox in those days?
It was really exciting. These were the closing days of the motion picture, what should I call it? They had their
studio system?
The studio system. They had their producers under contract, the writers were under contract, the directors and the stars. They even had cameramen, editors, and a number of the key members of the crew were all under yearly contracts. They had complete control of the production of films. And at that time, production worked 6 days a week, but the office worked 5. And I said I would work a 6th day for nothing if I could work the 6th day as a messenger on the set. And they figured, why not? Let them work for nothing on the set. And that was exciting, because I was on the set, I saw how they were making films, I saw from my own standpoint how I thought certain money was being wasted, and so I learned a great deal.
Some of the people you might have encountered in those days?
Well, I do remember this. I eventually got a promotion to the story department where I became a story analyst, which is a fancy way of saying reader. I read scripts and novels, short stories, things that were submitted for possible pictures. And I wrote bad critiques of everything. And the head of the story department said, Roger, you've knocked everything we've ever given you. And I said, I'm the youngest guy in the department. You give me the worst stuff. Of course I'm going to knock it. So he said, all right, we'll try and do better. And they gave me a script called The Big Gun. And it was a Western. And I knew that they had Gregory Peck under contract with some sort of commitment that they had to make a picture with him by a certain date. And they wanted to make a Western. So I gave them notes on how I praised the script, gave notes on how it might be improved, and it became The Gunfighter, which was a classic Western. So that was my nicest experience at Fox.
Can you still tell when submitted a script what will work and what won't work just from reading it?
You can tell what won't work. You can't always tell what. Matter of fact, I'm not even certain I should say that. Who was it? There's a famous screenwriter, I think William Goldman, who wrote a book about motion picture production, and in it he said, nobody knows anything. Now what he really meant was, nobody knows everything. There are things that we all don't know. So I shouldn't say I can tell, but I can say in general, and there will always be exceptions, that I pretty much know what won't work. And with a little less confidence, I can say what I think will work, knowing that I can be wrong.
You have an amazing eye, it seems, for discovering talent. If you look through, the joke is, it's easier to list the people in Hollywood that you haven't influenced than the people you have. What do you think that's about?
Well, it started because I was doing well with my films, and I'd made a little money, and I wanted to invest it. And I didn't know anything about the stock market or real estate or the things people normally invest in, but I felt I knew something about low-budget motion picture making, and I was a young director socializing in Hollywood, and I thought I knew who the bright guys were. So I simply backed Andy Fenedy and Irv Kirshner in a little picture called Stakeout on Dope Street that we sold to Warner Brothers, and because I thought they were good. Andy was the producer and writer, and Irv Kirshner was the director. And they went on both to have good careers. We all made a solid profit off the picture, and I started backing people. The next person was my assistant, Francis Coppola, and I backed him in a picture called Dementia 13, and that did well. And I suddenly thought, this is a nice new variation on my career. Not only can I make my own films, but I can be backing people I think are good in their films, and that led me to start in 1970 my production and distribution company, New World Pictures, where I was producing the films and distributing them as well.
Jack Nicholson, the actors you've worked with too, is there something that tells you that someone is going to be good in a role, or do they have to get into it for you to know for sure? Generally, I know. Again, there are always exceptions, but generally I can tell that they're good. I knew Jack was good. I had no way of knowing that he would have the great career that he was going to have, but I was positive that he would have a good career. As a matter of fact, when I got my Academy Award, these awards, the Lifetime Achievement Awards, are given at the Governor's Ball, not at the on the televised thing, although they put a little clip of it on the televised show. And when I got my award, it was like we had our own party within the party, because Jack Nicholson was there. Francis Coppola couldn't make it, but he sent a couple of cases of Coppola wine, and all the guys were around. And I remember Jack lifted a glass to me and said, "Roger, thank you for having faith in me when nobody else did." And for people that don't know, Little Shop of Horrors was the film he was in for you. I've heard two different stories about the making of it. I've heard you had been filming a movie, got done, had a few more days on the set, so you shot it. And the other story I heard was that on a bet you said you could make a movie in just a couple days. Which one is the truth? The second one was correct. I was working out of a small rental studio in Hollywood, and they'd built a very nice set and left it standing. It was a standing set, and I was having lunch with the studio manager, and he mentioned that nobody was coming in to rent that stage. And I said, well, if you can hold it and nobody rents it, I'll have a script written and I'll shoot it. And Chuck Griffith and I, who was a writer, worked out the script. Chuck wrote the script in 2 weeks. I prepared it in 1 week, and then I shot it in 2 days and 1 night on a bet that I could make a film that fast. How does one make a film that fast, though? Well, it was actually, I shouldn't say simple, but the process was this. With Screen Actors Guild, their weekly rate per day is higher per day than the daily rate, if you understand what I mean. Right. So what I did, I hired the actors for a week, and I rehearsed, since the set was standing, I rehearsed them on the set Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then shot the picture on the set 2 days, Thursday and Friday, and then picked up 1 night of shooting later on. Does it amaze you that that particular story ended up becoming what it did, that it went on to the Broadway show and then the movie again of it? Does that surprise you? It surprised me, but what surprised me and somewhat disappointed me at the beginning was I thought this whole thing was such a fantastic way to make a picture. This picture should either be a big success or it should be a total failure. To my surprise, it was a modest success. But it then went on to play at midnight screenings on college campuses year after year after year, and it eventually did become a big success, and then it became an off-Broadway musical, which became a Broadway musical, then a big picture, which I think cost about $30 million, which was big money in those days, and it's still pretty big money. So the thing just keeps going, and it's still, the musical still plays, and I still send out, some DVDs are still sold every year on that picture. Does it surprise you when you hear the size budgets that are being used to make films today? Yes, particularly when
the person who's made twice the most expensive picture in the world, first Titanic, and second Avatar, started doing low-budget special effects on science fiction pictures for me.
I read somewhere that James Cameron was working as, I don't know if it's junior or apprentice, but a low-level model maker and on another film of yours, and that you came in and saw his work and promoted him up to the head of special effects, and one thing led to another.
That's very close to what was happening. We were doing a picture called Battle Beyond the Stars, and the production had gone well, but the special effects, which we knew we were going to go into post-production with, were not functioning as well as I thought they were, and some of them were not as good. And our office was in Venice, California, and my office was in Brentwood. The studio was in Venice and the office in Brentwood. So I sent my ace assistant, Gail Hurd, down to the studio, and I said, just spend a little time in the special effects department and come back and tell me what is going wrong. And she came back and she said, you've hired somebody you didn't know as head of special effects, and he's pretty good. He's kind of doing the job right, but he isn't really great. But we've got a model maker who is really good. So I did something I very seldom do. I went down to the studio, talked to Jim, gave him a raise, and which I don't often give raises in the midst of production, and promoted him. And he took over, and by the next picture, he was the head of special effects. By the next picture, he was production designer and second unit director.
Somebody doing something like model building, what is it you're noticing in him that says he can do more?
He was building beautiful, intricate models with a theme. For instance, one of the, Battle Beyond the Stars was sort of a group of space bandits who come together on a cause, and one of them was a gunfighter. And he designed a beautiful, sleek spaceship for the gunfighter. And I said, Jim, what was the theory? Because he would show me the sketches before he built the thing. And I looked at it and I said, this is great. I said, what were you thinking with this one? And he said, this one was the Ferrari.
Okay, but then probably your body of work that I remember first are the Poe series. And all through the 70s, they got a lot of replay on television, things like that. You worked with Vincent Price. What was the experience like?
It was great. I didn't start off to do a series of Poe pictures. I just wanted to do The Fall of the House of Usher. And Vincent was perfect for the role of Roderick Usher, who was an intelligent, educated, sensitive man. And I got along very, very well with Vincent because he was not only that, he was an excellent actor, and he was a good guy to work with. Also, he was able to bring a little humor to the later pictures. The first picture there wasn't that much humor in, but I tried to vary them as we got deeper into the cycle, and I started bringing humor into the pictures, and he was very good at that.
Yeah. When we look back at the earlier works, too, oftentimes, like even today, if we look at educational films and things that came out in the late 50s, early 60s, we see them as having a sense of humor to them that weren't implied when they were made. Your films, on the other hand, when we see that sense of humor, intentional in the earlier films?
Yes. My theory is this, and I may have stolen it from William Shakespeare, who stole it probably from somebody before him. If you will notice, in every one of Shakespeare's plays, no matter how serious the play, there are one or two minor characters who are comic relief. Shakespeare always brought a little humor into his most serious plays because he knew the audience wanted relief, they wanted to laugh. And I've always done that on the basis if I don't give them something to laugh at with the picture, they're very likely to find something to laugh at the picture.
Good point. Then you move into producing your own films, putting out your films your own. In a sense, you become your own studio head.
Yes.
From your earlier experiences, what did you enter into this thing wanting to do differently or to emulate from what you had seen before?
I felt that I understood the youth market, and these were the days of the drive-ins, and what films would appeal. I also felt my experience as a writer, producer, director taught me various aspects of filmmaking. And I thought with this knowledge, I could make good pictures for a youth audience inexpensively. I didn't know distribution, however. However, I did know certain people in distribution, and there was one man in particular, Larry Woolner, who had been an independent distributor himself for a little company that had folded, and I brought Larry in as a partner, and then later I bought him out because he wanted to have his own company, and Larry handled the distribution. So the company got off to a very good start. Every picture was successful for a number of years. It was a little amazing.
Same sense of pride for the films you produce as the ones you direct?
Almost. The films you direct, films I directed, I have a little more personal investment in. But as a producer, I still have much the same thing.
Yeah. Death Race 2000. That is another one of those films that just people know. There are bits of that dialogue that fall into our everyday life still. There are points for hitting certain people.
Yes.
Where did the idea for that come from, and how did it become a film you were doing?
Actually, the script changed as we went along. There was a short story called The Racer by Ib Melchior, which was about car racing in the future, in which the drivers tried to knock each other off the track. And I thought that's a great idea for a science fiction action picture. And I had a script written exactly that way. And I was not satisfied with the script. And I got the idea, why don't I add one additional element? It became a race from New York to New Los Angeles, and the drivers are scored on 2 points: how fast they could drive and how many pedestrians they could kill on the way.
Okay, where did that idea come from, though?
I don't know. It came, but here's how the script went 3 ways. First, it was the racer itself. Then it was the idea I just told you, but it was still a serious picture. And I looked at that script, a serious script. I looked at the script and I thought, you know, this idea is so audacious, it's got to be done with humor. So I went to a 3rd script in which humor came into it, and that's what made the picture go.
Do you think that the humor makes them palatable, too? Instead of having a mean streak to them, they make them enjoyable entertainment?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, very much so.
Now, we have seemed to have a resurgence in, and I don't want to call them B-movies, horror films. I don't know the right terminology, but the ones that you're doing with sci-fi now. Where did that come from, and why was the audience ready for this again?
Well, for me, it started with sci-fi when I made a picture, a science fiction picture called Dino Croc, about a prehistoric crocodile. And I sold it to the Sci-Fi Channel. It's the first time I'd ever done anything with them. And it got a big rating. So they asked me to do another, and I ended up doing Dino Croc, Dino Shark, Super Gator, and a couple of others. And I'd come up with all of these ideas, and they would commission it. They would buy the picture in advance, and I would make the picture. And they called me for Sharktopus. They said, all right, we've got a title this time. Do you want to make Sharktopus? And I said, no. And they said, why? And I said, my theory, which I still believe in, but not so much anymore. I said, my theory is this. You can go to a certain level of insanity with your title, and the audience is intrigued. You go over that level, and the audience says, oh, cut it out. And right. I said, Dino Croc and Dino Shark are insane to the level that the audience is intrigued. In my opinion, Sharktopus goes above that level, and it will turn upon itself. But we talked a while, and my wife and I, Julie and I, co-produced the picture, and to both my surprise and maybe sci-fi's surprise, the publicity has been the greatest of anything they've had in a number of years. We've got a trailer on the internet that's had over 2 million hits, and even at my age, you can learn something.
But is there something about where we are today as a culture, as a country, that makes these films so viable again? Is there something in the psyche of where we are as a nation that makes this stuff work?
I think there is. I think all forms of culture, whether you want to say high culture, pop culture, or if there's any combination or difference between them, reflect the culture of the day. As to what the culture is and how they reflect it, it's more difficult to say. I would think that maybe because of what's going on in the world, the concept of horror films and science fiction films reflects what's going on, and specifically, horror films are gorier than they used to be. When I was doing the Poe films, it was done psychologically. We would set things up with camera movement, with a story, to build to a climax for the audience to scream. Today, you just cut a guy's arm off, and the audience screams. And I think that is a reflection of the difference in the culture.
Well, thank you for all of the entertainment, the screams, the laughs, the chills you've given us in a wonderful way. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Roger Corman.
To order a DVD of this or any episode of InnerVIEWS, please visit HoustonPBS.org.